Fridays at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to talk about the roster moves, some of the things the 49ers are doing, some of the depth chart shuffle, because the 49ers have certain players that are going to be coming back over the next couple weeks. We had some return already, and then there's going to be some that are going to be question marks for week one. And what is that going to look like when it comes to the depth chart? And how exactly do the 49ers go about some of the roster gymnastics they're going to have to incur, that they're going to have to take on to be able to build this roster and not lose players for the season? And so some of those injury updates are going to affect the roster. They're going to affect the depth chart. And I want to talk about all those things in this episode, because right now we're to the point where Saturday is going to be a big determining factor on who's going to ultimately stay with this football team. Now, it's not going to, determine everything, but if there's guys who are competing, it's a last-ditch effort for those guys to be able to compete and prove that they deserve to make this football team. And roster building is one of the most complicated things in the NFL, with some of the rules and the ways that you got to stash people that are injured. They have to potentially be on your 53-man roster initially. Then you can put them on IR. Then you can go ahead and bring somebody back. So having vested veterans who have 4 or more accrued seasons in the league, and having those guys be loyal to your program where you can go ahead and release them and they will come back, is something that's very pivotal. And we've seen the 49ers use this method multiple years. They might have to use it again because some of the injuries maybe just aren't going the way they thought. It could also open up roster spots for a few players. So it's interesting right now as the 49ers continue to build their roster, how these injuries are going to affect it and how the returns are going to affect the 49ers roster moving forward, and who's going to be starting when the 49ers get to the Seattle Seahawks in week 1. So that's what this episode is going to be about. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And of course, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're into betting, you need to get on with FanDuel. 49ers are favored to win the West at plus 160. So that is a positive thing for the 49ers. You can do that. Of course, when the week 1 matchup comes, bet on the 49ers to beat Seattle Seahawks. There's lots of, player props. There's all kinds of fun things with this. So bet with FanDuel. Really appreciate everyone that does. They are the title sponsor of 49ers Cutback. But let's get into this because I think this is going to be an interesting topic. And one of the keys has been question marks about the 49ers offensive line. That has been one of the things that's definitely been on everybody's mind, is what's going to happen with this 49ers offensive line and how is it going to be built. And the bad news is nobody came back to the 49ers offensive line, but we did get some key updates on a couple of guys. And I want to start there because I think that this is a position that needs to be very serviceable. And I say serviceable because it's got to be good enough. And we know Brock Purdy's really good at evading. He's really good at extending plays and making things happen down the field. However, we've got to have a serviceable offensive line that can be able to compete. And it's going to be a tough task when they line up week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks with that defensive line led by Leonard Williams. It's going to be one of the tough matchups early on in the season for the 49ers offensive line. And so it's very nerve-wracking to think about the 49ers being without both starting interior offensive linemen, the 2 guards. And we got an update on Dominic Pooney, and it's just as Kyle Shanahan had said, so he kind of just doubled down on it being a sprained PCL and that Dominic Pooney's out a few weeks. So if you look at the timeline, there is a chance that he's going to be available week 1. There's also a chance that he's not going to be available week 1, and the 49ers are going to have to go with a second option. Now, what complicates things is Ben Bartch has also been dealing with an elbow injury. And if you're considering the 49ers might have to play two backup offensive guards, that definitely stresses you a little bit. So, what we did find out, though, is Kyle Shanahan said Ben Barch is capable of playing with an elbow brace. He said that Matt Hennessy has played with the elbow brace, that Trent Williams a couple years ago played with the elbow brace, and he said as long as he doesn't have to throw the football, a little bit of humor coming from Kyle Shanahan, that Ben Barch could potentially be ready for week one using an elbow brace. So I think just kind of listening to how Kyle Shanahan's talking, there's a likelihood that the right guard spot, Dominic Pooney, could be in play for week one, and the 49ers might be playing one backup offensive lineman there. But it does appear that Ben Barch will be ready to go week one. That is good news. Better to have one guy out than two. So a little bit of positive news, a positive direction there. Now, it's not a foregone conclusion that Ben Barch is going to play, with the brace, but I think Kyle Shanahan bringing it up means they think that's going to happen. I think it's smart that they've been giving him time off, allowing it to heal. Then he can put on the brace so it's further along in the process. You're not just going out there and getting back to work with the brace on. It doesn't have the opportunity to heal up a little bit. So that's smart. But what happens at right guard if Dominic Pooney's not ready to go? Well, we know who the usual suspects have been. You have Connor Kobe, who took reps at guard this week at right guard. He's been taking all of his reps at left guard during training camp, but the 49ers are going to give him a shot at right guard. So he's taking reps there. Nick Zakelj, who had been taking reps at right guard over the last week and a half, he moved back to left guard and is getting reps there. I think those two guys are definitely in competition and contention for that right guard position. Now, how do we feel about that? I think it's concerning. And, you had Connor Kobe, who had a really good week one preseason. Week two, it was a little bit, more touch and go. He had some struggles in certain areas. You've seen some things he needs to get better at. Nick Zakelj, same thing. I don't think it was as bad as most people thought, but I think it wasn't good enough to be a starting offensive lineman in this league for sure. So I think that those two guys are, options for the 49ers. That's what Kyle Shanahan kind of, alluded to. But he threw another name out there as well that we have kind of talked about for a little while, and that's Spencer Burford. And Spencer Burford has been a starting right guard for the San Francisco 49ers. In fact, he played guard in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So he's very experienced. He understands the role, the job. He could just slide right in there and play right guard. And honestly, I would not be surprised if that's what the 49ers ultimately do, is put Spencer Burford at right guard. He's the most experienced of the guys. He's the best at playing guard of the guys we've talked about. And I know we're high on Connor Kobe, but I think it makes sense to give Connor Kobe more time to kind of marinate and figure things out. Now, if Kobe comes out against the Chargers, plays really well, maybe that steamrolls him into a position to go ahead and play right guard. But I think that Spencer Burford, I know he's the number one tackle behind Trent Williams, but playing him at right guard might be the way to go early on in the season if Dominic Pooney's not going to be ready. And if something happened to Trent, you could always kick him out and then go with Connor Kobe or Nick Zakelj. So to me, it's something that Shanahan keeps throwing around, and I think that's a real possibility that it could be Spencer Burford. And I think that's part of the reason Spencer Burford is a lock to make this team. He's the number one tackle going in, and he could be the number one guard going in as well. He's the ultimate sixth offensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers. So I think it leans towards Burford, but this is going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next several weeks. The hope is that Dominic Pooney's ready to go week one, and we don't have to worry about this. But just in case, I think Spencer Burford probably makes the most sense to move over there and play guard. And like Kyle Shanahan said, we'll see how this pans out. So I am curious if they don't give Spencer Burford a few reps at guard this week. That will be interesting to see. He might not need them, but that could be interesting to see what they do with that. Now, the guys returning from injury was pretty significant because you got some starters back as well. You got Jason Pennick. He had been dealing with a heel injury. Now he's going to come back, and he's a starting safety for the 49ers. And then it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Is it going to be Pennick and Siegel together? Is it going to be Pennick and Brown like we started training camp? And so Jason Pennick coming back kind of fluctuates this depth chart a little bit. He steps in as the number one safety, and then it kind of falls after that. Jair Brown, Marquise Siegel. How do these guys sit? How do these guys, lie in the pecking order of the 49ers depth chart? And the reason that it's important for Pennick to come back is you get that veteran leadership. You get that guy that understands the system. He plays really well in the box. And we've been so excited about what Chase Lucas has been able to do, blitzing off the edge from that nickel position. Wait until you see Jason Pennick, who is the number one blitzing safety in the NFL last year. All you have to do is go back and watch some of the things he did with the Giants, and he was a real problem for a lot of quarterbacks. And so that's the kind of player that can make an impact on your team. But we also seen him in the week 1 matchup versus Denver miss a couple tackles. So we want to see him kind of get used to playing, getting back to making those form tackles and doing a good job, because Siegel's been doing really good in that category. But Pennick coming back is really big. Of course, Nick Bosa, he comes back, and he was dealing with a neck injury. We know Bosa is going to be Bosa, and this is good news. He's trending on the right direction. He will not play against the Chargers more than likely. He'll be gearing up for that first matchup for Seattle, but it's good to have him back out there and doing a good job. Another starter out there is Renardo Green. And Green made an impact in his first practice back. No surprises there. Renardo Green, Diamond Lenore had great things to say about him. He's going to end up being a very impactful player on this team. And I think the 49ers feel comfortable with him and Diamond Lenore on the outside. So Renardo Green coming back, Lenore's throwing around that he thinks he can be an elite playmaker in this league. I think that's great news for the 49ers, but it'll also be the first time that we start seeing the 49ers depth chart play out the way it should, right? Demo and Renardo Green out on the outsides, which makes some of the other guys, backups, playing with those twos, Dallas Flowers and those guys who have played really well in Renardo Green's absence. But it kind of gives these guys, now you start taking a look at the fresh look of what the depth chart's going to look like, and it starts looking a little bit more deep at cornerback when you've got Renardo Green, Diamond Lenore up top, Dallas Flowers as the number 3 guy right now on the outside, not on the inside, but on the outside. And then you've got Upton Stout, and Upton Stout is not ready to come back yet. Kyle Shanahan said he's close, so he had a workout on Monday. And then Tuesday, they gave him a rest day, and he said, we're just being careful with the calf, but he's not worried about him being available for week 1. But one of the question marks that comes out of that is he going to be prepared to contribute week 1? With missing all these practices, is he ready to go as a starting nickel corner? I tend to lean towards the not ready to go as a starting nickel corner, and not because he hasn't impressed. He very much so has impressed, but he hasn't played in any of the preseason games. And I think that is going to be a big decision maker for the 49ers. Now, maybe he comes back, he looks really good in practice, and the 49ers decide to go that direction. But you have a nickel corner in Chase Lucas that understands what to do, and he's done such a great job over the last 2 weeks. I think he's in the mix. But also, let's see what happens with Trey Brown. Now, Trey Brown's dealing with a heel injury as well, and he hasn't come back to practice. And it might start getting a little shaky for Trey Brown making this roster. I think that there's still a shot he does, because he has the veteran skills. He understands Seattle really well. And if the 49ers feel comfortable with him, he might be the best one to line up to go against Jackson Smith-Njigba playing in the slot and what he's done in this league. He understands him, the former teammates. But also, he's played against Cooper Kupp, so he understands what his skill sets are as well. So I think that you've got a situation where the 49ers have more depth at cornerback than originally thought, with the kind of emergence of Dallas Flowers, the way the Upton Stout looked through training camp, because Trey Brown came in as the number 3 cornerback, and now we're talking about him as potentially cornerback 4, cornerback 5. I think that's good news, because of some of the young guys stepping up. So that's been really good for Renardo Green. Now, Jordan Elliott also came back, and I know this one's a little bit more contentious for people, but I do believe Jordan Elliott's a starting defensive lineman for the San Francisco 49ers. And it was a couple years ago he started for the Cleveland Browns and did a pretty good job. That's why the 49ers were willing to bring him over last year. And Elliott already made an impact day one back at practice, making, Nick Zakel struggle a little bit. He's a guy that does have the ability to penetrate. So when the 49ers go to a defensive line, and I believe this will be the starting defensive line week one versus Seattle, Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis, who has really played well this offseason, when you put those guys together, you have two guys that can really penetrate and generate pressure up the middle for this 49ers defense. Now, the one place that they're going to have to prove that they can hold up is against the run. Jordan Elliott has been hit and miss. He was better in Cleveland playing for Schwartz than he was last year playing for Coach Nick Sorensen. So we'll see what happens and if the 49ers can improve run defense, even with Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis on the field. But we do know that they're going to be more game wreckers as far as they're going to make plays in the backfield. Elliott is one of those guys, he flashes. And so I think getting him back is very important. You got veterans now. I mean, Kalia Davis has been in the league for a few years. Jordan Elliott's been around for a while. You get these two guys together, that kind of allows the young guys to be able to rotate through. Now, we're probably a week or so away from CJ West coming back, but we've got other guys who are competing for roster spots. Sebastian Valdez competing for a roster spot. Evan Anderson competing for a roster spot. I think that both of those guys have to have really good games coming up to kind of prove their mettle for this 49ers football team. And all the while, we're wanting to see Alfred Collins get better. But I think Alfred Collins being a part of a rotation where he can be a two-down defensive tackle is very important. Because then when he's on that Bravo group and he is a backup D tackle, you can pull him out on third down and you could put in, Mikael Williams, and you could also go with Jordan Elliott or Kalia Davis, and they generate more pass rush. And so he can kind of hone in on his run stopping ability until it's time, for him to kind of develop his pass rush skills a little bit more. So that's something that makes this defense so much better. I think CJ West is further along when it comes to pass rush. And so we'll kind of see how that thing plays out. But it's nice having Jordan Elliott back at what he's able to do. And Sam Okuwanu came back as well. And with the news that Yetur Gross-Matos is likely to stay on the PUP list to start the season, his knee's not responding as quickly as they thought, it means Sam Okuwanu is more important to this 49ers roster. Now, I have thought for a while that Okuwanu and Robert Beal Jr. had a real good chance of both making this roster. Now, Robert Beal Jr., I don't know when he's going to come back from injury. Hopefully, it's going to be the next week or so, so that way he could be available as well. And one of the reasons that Robert Beal Jr. is probably going to make this roster is he's really good at special teams. And so you got Okuwanu, you got Robert Beal Jr., you got Bryce Huff, you got Nick Bosa, you got Mikael Williams, who Kyle Shanahan said is close, but not back yet. He was dealing with a little bit of, something there, a little bit of pain. So they wanted to make sure they gave it a little bit more time, which I think is smart to do. They could give him this week. He could come back next week and get full preparation, 2 weeks of preparation for the regular season, kind of knock off the rust and be ready to go. So 49ers kind of getting healthy at defensive end, but still missing Robert Beal Jr. as one of those guys that could make this roster. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. But I've been very impressed with Bryce Huff. He has been as advertised at setting the edge better in the run game than even we anticipated as a defensive end. And I think that we've saw some things, from Mikael Williams in practice. We haven't seen it in the preseason, but we saw it in practice. They were feeling pretty confident about this defensive end unit who has been somewhat a mash unit. All kinds of guys coming off the street, guys going in and out as they get injured. And so 49ers have had a ton of bodies rolling through. They've been sitting there, and the guys they really want to play are Sam Okuwanu and Robert Beal Jr. in the back part of this roster because they were competing, for a roster spot. But with Yetur Gross-Matos staying on the PUP list, there's a likelihood that both of those guys make the team. And it also means your NASCAR unit looks a little bit different. Mikael Williams will probably handle most of the interior pass rush. There'll be some Sam Okuwanu as well, but those guys will kind of go in that NASCAR group and line up over guards. So that'll be interesting to watch as well. And then running back Isaac Guerendo. And, Patrick Taylor Jr. out for the year. That's unfortunate. You dislocated shoulder. You're thinking, a couple weeks, no big deal. They find out there's a fracture. He's going to have surgery. And that pretty much ends his season. And, the thing was, I do believe the 49ers were going to ask Patrick Taylor Jr. and Jeff Wilson Jr. to help them with a little bit of roster gymnastics. And you have Corey Kiner, who suffered the high ankle sprain. And Kyle Shanahan said after the game, it was 4 weeks. Well, now he's saying this is going to be probably a lot longer than that. So there's a likelihood that the 49ers are going to put Corey Kiner on ice and put him on the IR. Now, if they put him on IR before the 53-man roster cut down, he's done for the season. I think that there's a chance, and I don't know for sure they're going to do this, but I think there's a chance that they're going to ask Jeff Wilson Jr. now, he's the only vested veteran, there, that they can release him and then bring him back once they've moved Corey Kiner to the IR. I think that they'll probably do that. I think they're planning on doing that with Patrick Taylor as well, a way to play roster gymnastics. You have Christian McCaffrey, you have Isaac Guerrero, your Jordan James is going to come back next week, but you do need that veteran presence, someone you can count on. And so I do think it's going to be Jeff Wilson Jr., but I think we might see him get cut initially. And then once they get Corey Kiner, on the IR, then they bring him back. So they don't lose Kiner for the whole year in case they need him to come back. But also, they kind of fill out this roster with running backs. But Guerrero coming back is huge because Guerrero's got the most explosive ability of any of the 49ers running backs. He's a whole shot guy. He can take it to the house. He runs that outside zone. He has the ability to run that outside zone really well. We haven't seen it quite take effect yet, but he does have that ability. Plus, his receiving skills out of the backfield. I think Brock Purdy feels really comfortable with McCaffrey and with Isaac Guerrero. So having that 1-2 punch is kind of nice. And if you could throw a Jeff Wilson Jr. in there, you have 3 guys you can count on first, second, and third down. And I think that would give kind of Jordan James time to reacclimate to playing football and kind of work his way in. They could give him some short yardage carries here and there, but Jeff Wilson Jr. could also take that on. But I think that it's a kind of a important part of roster building is somewhat the way you're going to move guys around. So I kind of think that that's going to happen to Kiner, but it's nice having Guerrero back, having that explosiveness at running back, and it comes at just the right time with the Patrick Taylor injury. The 49ers have been unfortunate how many injuries they've suffered, but the good news is Isaac Guerrero's back, Christian McCaffrey staying healthy, and then you've got Jordan James who will be back. He had the finger surgery. They said a couple of weeks. He'll be back in a week or two. Should be ready to go for week 1. Jeff Wilson Jr. looked pretty good in his preseason debut, and he's going to get his legs underneath him, and I'm sure he'll even look better the more time comes by, and I'm sure he'll get a good run in this game versus the Chargers. So some good stuff there. Now, Mac Jones suffered a injury, a sprained knee, so he's going to be out. So the 49ers signed Nate Sudfeld, a familiar face to the San Francisco 49ers, and Sudfeld's going to come in, and he's going to be the third-string quarterback. We don't know how much Brock Purdy's going to play. Kyle Shanahan, didn't really go into how much he expects Brock Purdy to play or if Brock Purdy will play. He said, I haven't decided yet. I initially planned on playing some guys. To be honest, I'm getting less on that right now, especially with Mac being out. That's why we brought in Nate Sudfeld. Too, because I know we're going to want at least 2 other guys to play besides Brock if he does go, but I'll decide on that after these next 2 practices. So it's up in the air about Brock Purdy and whether he's going to play against the Chargers, and it seems like Kyle Shanahan was prepared for this to be a dress rehearsal game. But with some of the injury concerns, I'm sure he's starting to think a little bit more on the cautionary side of not playing those guys. They played them a little bit, but you had Dominic Pooney get hurt. Do you want to run the risk of having another injury? I think that's where he's kind of looking at. So it's up in the air, but you needed to have at least 3 quarterbacks that were going to be able to go. Of course, you could start Carter Bradley. You could play him most of the game. You could play Nate Sudfeld, the second half of the game if you wanted to, and just have Brock Purdy available in case you needed to get through the game. That's always a possibility. So I think that, right now, I don't know what's going to happen with Brock, but I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Carter Bradley, a heavy dose of Nate Sudfeld, and let's see what Sudfeld has, because the 49ers are likely going to keep just 2 quarterbacks on the active roster when they cut down to 53. Now, they might want, a veteran on the practice squad. So Carter Bradley's a possibility to be on that practice squad. He does have that rocket arm, if they want to be able to continue trying to develop him, seeing what he's got, they could put him on the practice squad. But they might also want somebody who's a veteran. And Nate Sudfeld has a good relationship with Brock Purdy, and maybe they want a guy like him that could be there just in case, especially with the injury to Mac Jones. Now, they did say they expect Mac Jones to be ready to go week 1, but having a veteran is something that's a little bit, different from, having a guy like Carter Bradley that's got a lot of development still to go. So Sudfeld comes back. I think that is important for this 49ers football team, and how you're going to get guys back and where they're going to be. Now, one of the other key elements is the 49ers are in a situation where it looks like they're going to get multiple guys back. They're going to get, a bunch of guys back right before the season starts. They're going to get healthy at the right time. And I think that's very important for this football team. And it's something that's, been a little bit of a struggle for them when it comes to health. But if they all come back at the right time, it's going to be very beneficial. Now, guys who are not going to come back in time, Kevin Givens, he's likely to be put on IR, another potential roster gymnastics move where you wait and put him on, or you could designate him for return or just outright IR him. So far, they haven't decided to just outright IR him. So I think he might be one of those guys designated for return, and that you're going to bring him back at some point. I think that's possible. Malik Mustafa will stay on the PUP list. Yetur Gross-Matos will stay on the PUP list. They do not affect your 53-man roster. Curtis Rourke, he will stay on the 49ers NFI list, and so they don't have to worry about a roster spot for him or losing him. I think that Corey Kiner is likely to go on IR post 53-man roster. I think that could really happen for him. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Jordan Watkins have the same thing happen. And I know Jordan Watkins is a guy they don't want to lose, so he will make the initial 53-man roster. And then with roster gymnastics, I think they'll do the same thing. Potentially, they're probably going to waive a lot of their veteran wide receivers and say, hey, Russell Gage, Robbie Chosen, Isaiah Hodgins, we're going to let you guys go, and we got to move some guys around. But once we do, we're going to bring you back to this active 53-man roster. And I think that's exactly what they'll do in some cases. So I think that there's a chance, especially, with Jordan Watkins, that he could end up on IR and miss some games if he's not ready to go, because Kyle talked about the fact he's going to need to kind of get his legs back underneath him, get some practice time. So there's some concerns there. So some young guys for the 49ers might end up missing the first part of this season, and they might have to count on veterans. And that's probably why the 49ers are rumored to be in the mix for a veteran wide receiver. We do know that they were in on John Mechie. That has been widely reported by pretty much everybody that's in the know around the league, that the 49ers were in a bidding war with the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles definitely paid more than the 49ers were going to be willing to pay for John Mechie. And I know that, there's probably other opportunities around the league for the 49ers, and they're taking a look at it. They're not the only team. The Minnesota Vikings are also looking for a wide receiver. So there's a chance the 49ers could add someone in the next 6 days, add a player, before they do the roster cut down. We'll see what happens. But I think that they're going to look at all avenues. I don't think the players currently on this roster are the only players the 49ers are going to have on this roster. I think they're going to look at players who get cut from other football teams. I think they're going to look at other veterans that they could potentially bring in once they've kind of gotten to that 53-man roster spot. Once you know where Jordan Watkins is going to be as far as his health, how you see Jacob Cowing perform, in this game versus the Chargers, I think there's going to be some things that are determined. And so then they'll look in the waiver wire. They're still going to be pretty high on the waiver wire if they want to pick up a wide receiver through waivers. Maybe a veteran gets released and you can go and try to sign them. Or maybe somebody says, we've got an abundance of wide receivers. This guy's not going to make our team. Instead of just losing him for nothing, let's flip him for a late round draft pick. And I think that's what the 49ers are kind of waiting for, these teams to decide, especially the teams that are very roster heavy with wide receivers, that they might want to go ahead and just flip somebody. And the 49ers could grab somebody and kind of put them on this roster because they do need some young depth and players that can contribute to this team. And they're looking for a specific type of player because the veterans the 49ers have aren't exactly stretch the field guys. Jordan Watkins could provide that for this football team as a young guy, but that's not what you're going to get from Russell Gage or, Isaiah Hodgins or Robbie Chosen. Chosen's still athletic, but not exactly the burner he was before in his career. So some decisions to make there, and it could mean that they've got to look outside the organization. I think they're going to look at all avenues, and we'll see. I don't think they're going to pay a lot. So I think they want to keep this thing, somewhat cheap. We'll see what happens with Juwan. And Kyle Shanahan said about Juwan Jennings, he needs to get some practice in if he's going to play week 1. So there's a little bit of concerns there. If Juwan Jennings comes back next week, no concerns. If he comes back the week after, no concerns. But we'll see what happens with Juwan. And, I don't know how much of this is injury. Kyle says the difference between Brandon Ayuk last year and Juwan Jennings is Brandon was healthy and Juwan's not. So he's saying the injury is legit and there. So hopefully Juwan Jennings' calf can respond to treatment and he can get back out there. 49ers need him, especially right now. We don't know what's going to happen with Demarcus Robinson, but in the next few weeks, we're going to find out whether he's suspended or not. So it's going to be interesting. So the 49ers roster depth chart shuffle continues. Of course, as we get through the Chargers game, it's going to change a lot. And of course, the 53-man roster will have a really good idea of what it looks like. Because the 49ers will have to make decisions on injuries and things like that. So it's going to be fun. This game against the Chargers is going to be fun. We're going to see players doing everything they can to make this roster, and they're going to have a good showing. It's going to be, it's going to be a blast to see some of the competitions that are going on for the young guys and key veterans that are scrapping to make this team. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating if you think I deserve it. Of course, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.